All right, can I have a motion to reconvene?
Move to
Susan Fox?
reconvene. Move to reconvene into open session.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Lorraine, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is order of business. There are no public appearances. Can I have a motion for the consent agenda? Andrew?
I move to move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Lorraine, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next are recognitions.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, I just would like to recognize that in the consent agenda that you just approved, one of the items was a teacher retirement, Ruth Flanagan, who currently teaches at the middle school at Glacial Drumlin. Really happy for her retiring at the end of the year. She's been with the school district for 20 years. And so congratulations to Ruth, and wish her the best. February is Black History Month, and all of our schools are celebrating. Staff and students are making a point to focus the creativity, entrepreneurship, civic engagement, and liberation of African Americans instead of the focus on slavery, segregation, and other struggles. And there's an excerpt for you to be able to click on and read from our Monona Grove High School Black Student Union's message on the morning announcements. The elementary schools participated in the Great Kindness Week Challenge at the end of January. Each day, students participated in different activities and dressing up. Activities included reading books about kindness, a food drive, and painting rocks to display in the gardens this spring. Congratulations to the Model UN team on their wildly successful virtual competition. Delegates recently attended the Chicago International Model UN competition. MG was represented in 9 different committees and brought home awards in 6 of them. Special congrats to Miriam Israel, Mary Kahns, Alex Collar, Olivia Lang, Lauren Faywiger, and Krishna Elwell. This week is National School Counseling Week, and we'd like to take a moment to give our thanks and appreciation to all of our school counselors: Susan Bishop, Jackie Broom, Andrew Burke, Melissa Burke, Scott Groff, Amanda Koshelek, Emily McGee, Peg Sisman, and there's a recognition post as well for you on LinkedIn. And the Monona Grove boys swim team won the 2022 Badger East Conference Championship meet at Stoughton on Saturday. The team achieved many awards, including first place in the 50 and 100-yard freestyle, won by Jonah Elfers, first place in the 100-yard butterfly and 100-yard backstroke, won by Cameron Tejeda, and first place for the 100-yard medley and 200 and 400-yard freestyle earned by the A relay teams. The team is now gearing up for their sectional championship meet at Verona Area High School. And the Winnequa School is hosting an all-school read thanks to the donation of books from the Monona PTO. Last week, Hootie the Owl visited classrooms to deliver the book Dragons in a Bag, along with a plain tote bag that classrooms will later decorate to represent what the book means to them. And there's some photos from the book handout as well for you. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Next are correspondence and announcements. So I do want to acknowledge that the school board has received quite a few emails in the past 2 weeks regarding the mask mandate, and we appreciate your feedback and input in regards to that. Our superintendent will kind of address some of those concerns that you have and talk a little bit about the mask mandate. So I wanted to acknowledge that we have received your emails, even though we haven't responded probably to every one of you. We have received it, and we appreciate your feedback. All right, next are administrative reports and principal report, Angie Fossil from Winnequa.
All right, good evening. So first I want to start by just saying thank you for allowing us to have the opportunity to come on and talk with you all tonight. We'll start with some introductions. So I'm Angie Fassel, principal at Winnequa.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jesse Starr. I'm the associate principal at Winnequa.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jenny Fonner, a third grade teacher at Winnequa.
Hi, I'm Mindy Boyd, a second grade teacher at Winnequa.
And I'm Jenny Koski, TOSA teacher on special assignment at Winnequa.
All right, so Jesse, can you present? All right. So we wanted to just kind of take a little bit of different approach to our presentation tonight. And we really wanted to focus on equity. And I am calling it equity unsiloed. Google doesn't like my word unsiloed. It redlines it for me. But I think that one of the important things is that equity doesn't live in a silo. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So as you are well aware, our district has put a lot of resources, both time and energy and physical resources, and dedicated that to helping our staff learn and grow in the area of creating an equitable learning environment for all of our students. We've taken time to both reflect on our own personal journeys and also evaluate our systems and structures and that are currently in place and have been in place in the past that may not have created a learning environment that helps all of our students to succeed. But we know that learning and those conversations can't live by themselves in their own silo. And so in order for us to have the intended and the positive impact on our students, both academically and social emotionally, we want this work to live in all the places in our building and all of our actions in our building. So we're here tonight to share with you how we've worked to unsilo the equity work and infuse it into all of the systems in our building. And taking it kind of even one step further, as we model what that inclusivity looks like for our students, we also want to show how our students have taken that advocacy on themselves, which is amazing to see. So tonight we're going to share some of the examples of that hard work. We're going to talk a little bit about our staff equity team and how that drives our work within our building. Talk about where equity lives in co-planning. I know you've heard from other buildings about that co-planning process. It's so integral to our instruction and planning here in our district. And we really want to showcase how equity has come into that co-planning process. We want to talk and show you the ways in which we have grown our students' identity, both about themselves, but also their academic identities. We want to talk about how equity has and lives in our current behavior model and expectations. And then just how it has, how it shows itself in our general Winnequa school community. So I'm going to turn it over to Mindy to start talking about our staff equity team.
Thanks, Angie. So tonight I'm here to talk about our Winnequa School Equity Team. Our team formed over 10 years ago, and over those 10 years, it's taken many, many different forms. It started with a small selected group of teachers who attended different trainings, and it's really morphed to be what it is today, which is a committee that includes and is open to all staff in the building. Because of our equity work, it doesn't just live with a small number of us, it's owned by our whole school. So staff are invited each month to join in when they can. The commitment is outside of school time, and so teachers are giving of their time freely, and it's really amazing to see the number of staff that are truly dedicated to this work every month. Through all of its changes, though, one thing that stayed the same is that our committee continues to be driven by the teachers and by the staff. From the ideas shared to the needs presented to the planning and implementation and sharing out, everything comes from our staff. In our early years, we really focused on drawing awareness to our own implicit bias and exploring and challenging our thinking around professional development, movie nights, and book clubs. Staff led and engaged in courageous conversations with the school during in-services and after-school opportunities that were all graciously allowed by our administration. We then began to explore our own teacher identities and the impact that our identities have on our classroom and our students. After we recognized the power of our identity awareness, we began to think about how we could share this experience with our students. So currently, we're rolling out the identity standards from Teaching Tolerance. And these standards are just one piece of their anti-bias framework. But we feel that it's super important for our students' development to focus on the identity. And so together with staff, we explore ways to introduce and share this identity work with our youngest learners in 4K all the way through 5th grade. Our equity committee doesn't only provide professional development, though, it also provides resources for staff and students as well. Last year, one of our big goals and work was to create a hub that had vetted resources that really explored excellence in all areas of identity. And this link is on the slides. If you guys want to check it out later, you can. The resource hub utilized all the expertise of multiple staff members, from Amber Heffernan, whose amazing Excel abilities allows for easy searching, to all the teachers who compiled and shared lists of resources and lesson plans. The document is super useful and is a go-to resource for teams to use during their C3 planning, and has been a great reminder to keep equity at the center of our conversations. Our team didn't stop there, though. We saw the need that we needed to share this great work that was happening within our school with our community and families. So last year, we hosted 2 family outreach nights where we shared what the identity standards were we're working on with families, and then shared classroom examples of classroom activities and things that were happening within the classrooms, and then allowed for the families to explore some of their identities on their own. And then not only with those outreach nights, but we also have a link that's available to all families to access anytime on our Winnequa School homepage, and it's updated pretty regularly with our whatever identity standard we're working on. It has books and book lists that families can access, along with resources for families and some at-home activities. One thing that's really unique about our equity team at Winnequa, though, is it goes beyond just addressing the school and staff needs or student needs, but really the needs of our staff. The most recognizable way that we saw this happen was during the events of the 2020 and 2021 school year. Our team came together, and our monthly meetings really became a safe space for us to share and to try to make sense of all the current events that were happening in our world and community. And then together as a team, we were able to grapple with the events and learn and grow from each other, and really address how we were going to face our classrooms with grace and honesty in our changing landscapes. Throughout the past 10 plus years of our committee, we've seen amazing changes within our committee and team, but most importantly, throughout the school. Because of our continued commitment to equity and the continued conversations and focus, our school has built a shared vocabulary and vision about how important our equity work is. We now, as a building and staff, have the capacity to have difficult conversations with each other and our students. We have the comfort in knowing that each of us has a shared vision and a commitment to equity that goes beyond just professional development and really into our students and their families. And we're super excited to continue our work with equity at Winnequa because we're aware that it's not something that we'll ever finish. It's an ongoing journey. So that's a little bit about our equity team.
All right, next we're going to move into talking about co-planning, and I'm going to start out with just the first part of it, talking about our morning and class meetings that happen on a daily basis in every classroom. Our student services team does an amazing job providing weekly morning meeting plans for teachers. These meetings are an engaging way to start each day. They build a strong, inclusive classroom community and sets children up for success socially and emotionally. Through these meetings, students are learning about each other, building relationships, working together, learning SEL skills and tools, forming their own identities, and learning about diversity and other cultures related to social justice. Incorporating all of these skills has had such a positive impact on students' well-being, and that in turn gets them ready to learn. So we also start our co-planning time discussing some of this SEL and morning meetings. The first part of every co-planning meeting is spent discussing the content for the upcoming week of SEL and morning meeting lessons. Grade level teams also bring up specific student needs related to SEL or behavior, and lessons are added to address those areas. So it's really specific to student needs that the lessons can be built around. This is just a small part of our student-focused co-planning time. Jenny Fonner is going to give a little bit more detail on how the rest of that time looks.
Thanks, Jenny. All right, so I'm just going to talk a little about the bullet points here. So starting with the reflection questions from Goldie Mohammed. So we use these questions to help revise and design lessons that reflect our current students and their needs. Each year is a new opportunity for us as educators to grow as a building and as a team and as individuals. These questions help keep our conversations current and allows for more intentional collaboration and conversations with staff who attend our co-planning meetings and may have more of a pulse on the building as a whole by being in multiple classrooms, grades, and especially during these COVID times where things can sometimes feel isolating. These questions keep our lessons fresh and current on what is happening outside the school in our community, our students' homes, and beyond. The lessons formed from these conversations include opportunities for the students to see themselves and build on their identities with the core curriculum as the foundation, and the resources developed around these questions align with our building and district equity PDs. Then diversity and resources. So we have worked hard as a building to weed through resources and literature with our equity lens. It has been a priority with funds at the building and individual classroom levels to replace and enhance with more diverse materials. A more recent change I have seen is the students becoming that voice. They are looking and challenging where they see themselves and pointing out when someone or a group or themselves seem misrepresented or unrepresented. Students want to see people who look like them doing things and experiencing things and dreaming of things that they are or want to do. Today, a student saw themselves represented in a story, accomplishing a goal and a dream that they currently have. They saw someone who looked like them become an astronaut, Ronald McNair, and he said, I can do that too. This was part of a lesson on a standard on asking and answering questions with a mentor text chosen with that connection to the student's interests and goals in mind. Another was a group of students advocating for more books on famous African Americans that weren't athletes or performers, but inventors, after reading a core curriculum text on Elijah McCoy. This led into a research project as a grade level, which in turn increased the books and materials on that topic and further diversified our collections. These are just two examples on how bringing in diverse resources and building on students' needs, voices, and interests grew their identities and allowed them and us to learn from each other as we never had before. Student identity. We started the last couple of years teaching around the identity standards that Mindy mentioned. And because of this work, we saw buy-in from the beginning from the students and an openness to share and be vulnerable as a class and a grade. This is a result of the work and learning we have done as a staff around identity and that students have experienced as a result of that work through the morning meetings that Jenny mentioned, SEL and subject lessons, etc. I think you will find children are more willing and enjoy talking and sharing about themselves, but the work we have done as educators and people has helped create those environments for vulnerability and sometimes difficult yet powerful conversations. The more both teachers know about their students and the students themselves and their classmates, the more student-focused lessons are created and designed by teachers and staff. You will hear some more examples of those, of that work in the next slides from some of our amazing staff members. And then finally, student-focused planning. In third grade, as part of our social studies curriculum, we learn about taking a stand, using our voice for change, advocacy, and peaceful protesting. Each year, these conversations and lessons may begin the same, but each year it evolves and grows into something the students want to take a stand for. I always start by asking, what would you take a stand for? We use that in our planning around the standards and what project could lead this, what project could, I start by asking, and then we use that in our planning around the standards and what project could this lead into, and how as a teacher and staff can we support them in this learning. Our students are at the front of our minds when planning, and we spend time getting to know our students. Our co-planning continues to change and support what the students need right now in front of us and what they currently need. We learn and grow together as a team, building in classroom, and as it says, the students are our focus.
So we do have some examples here tonight from a few different teachers. We did have them pre-record, so I'm going to be sharing some videos here of some examples of how student identity is shown throughout our hallways and throughout our schools. So if you could just give me a thumbs up after I play the video if you're able to hear the audio. If we're not able to get the audio to work, we can talk about these slides a little bit more in detail. We are going to be starting off by hearing from Ms. Dyer on some of these identity banners from her class.
Hello, MG School Board members. My name is Barb Dyer, and I am a third grade teacher at Winnequa. Getting to know our students and building strong relationships with them are the most important aspects of teaching. From the very first day, teachers play getting to know you activities to begin building a classroom culture of kindness, empathy, and safety. Beyond these activities, in third grade, we have students create an identity collage. At first, students fill it with their favorites, their favorite foods, their favorite sports, and of course, their favorite video games. But as we dive deeper into their identities, students discover that there is so much more that makes them who they are. Students realize the importance of families, traditions, heritage, and culture, and how each of these influence their identities. The students then add these identities to their collages. Next, we have the students create an identity banner using their collages. They fill the banner with words and unique illustrations that surround their names. These banners truly exemplify all the wonderful parts of each child's identity. Students love sharing and talking about their identities as they create their banners over several days. They also notice the intersectionality of traits that they have in common with their classmates. I can remember one student exclaiming, "I didn't know that you have ancestors from Ireland. I do too." A lot of pride went into these banners. You can see in the photos that these are hung in each child's individual cubby in the third grade hallway. Throughout this year, students will reflect and add to their banners new identities that they have discovered about themselves as they evolve into the remarkable leaders and change makers of our future. Thank you for having this opportunity to share with you just a little window into our world at Winnequa. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from Ms. Drabick, a fourth grade teacher here at Winnequa, on her identity poems.
Hi, my name is Sierra Drabick, and I teach fourth grade at Winnequa. I wanted to share a bit about the identity poems our fourth graders create at the beginning of the year. The assignment allows students to express who they are and delve into their identity. Before writing the poems, students explore positive adjectives to describe their character, what they love, what they feel, what they need, what they share, what they fear, and so on. I am always so impressed with the words students use to describe themselves. Some words that students wrote in their poems this year were determined, thoughtful, creative, inspiring, optimistic, empathetic, just to name a few. After brainstorming and reflecting, students begin writing their poems, and many students add illustrations to their final poems as well. Not only does this activity allow students to explore their own identity, but it also helps build our classroom community. Students discover similarities and what makes them unique and special. Students get the opportunity to learn more about each other as we share our poems during our class circle time. After, we hang our poems in our classroom to symbolize our identities and community. The activity creates a welcoming and safe space for students to learn. They take so much pride in their poems and their identities. Hi.
And finally, we will hear from Mr. Nick Garcia, one of our art teachers, on his clay art projects.
Hi, my name is Nick Garcia, and I am one of the art teachers here at Winnequa, the other art teacher being Jane Goodenough. And we have been working with 5th grade students this year on a clay project about their personal memories. We wanted to find a way that artists and students could explore their own identities, things that have happened to them in the past, and stuff that's really important to them and has influenced kind of who they've become now. Students explored their memories. They did a lot of research beforehand, kind of asking family members, grown-ups, people around them about stuff that have kind of played a role in their life. And then they chose a specific memory, whether that's like a family activity, maybe it was like meeting their pet for the first time, or just a favorite activity that they like to do with people close to them. And then they recreated that using clay. And so they spent a lot of time exploring how artists express their ideas and convey like their own personal experiences in their artwork as a way to kind of share that with others around them. 5th grade is a really fun group for clay because we spend most of 5th grade in that unit just exploring like how to combine more than one technique with clay. So they got to use a lot of different techniques in their projects and really have a lot of choice in kind of how they go about expressing their vision. During this, they were able to share a lot of memories with their friends and peers. While they're working, I just would overhear story after story from each other, kind of sharing their memories and then making connections with other people around the room. So it was kind of cool just to see them kind of working and talking about all these things that have happened to them and then kind of how that's influenced them now. So we learned a lot about each other. Some classes, one class in particular learned that like one of their classmates and students has ridden an elephant. Others have discovered that they have like similar pets, or maybe they go on similar trips. And so it was just really cool to see them making some of those special connections and kind of talking about some of those things and then expressing that in their artwork, which was really cool. So that's a project we've been really proud of. It's been fun. We've done this a couple times in the past, and it's always just a great way to kind of get the year started and learn about each other.
And so we're going to move on and talk a little bit about behavior expectations here at Winnequa and how they have been transformed over the years and some current practices that we have in place. So PBIS has been something that's been a part of the Winnequa Foundation for many years. PBIS standing for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. At Winnequa, PBIS for years has revolved around being respectful, responsible, and safe. And that is a phrase that is familiar to students and staff members and families alike. And one of the first things that, that Angie and I did this summer when I started was to look at PBIS through a different lens, and specifically looking at it through a lens of equity, looking at it through a lens of restorative justice that our district and our school has been doing a lot of work recently. And as we took time to look more deeply at PBIS and the systems in place, we found it to be a system that needed some work. It was a system that had its flaws and had many different areas that we knew we could improve in. So what we found in its current format was a system that wasn't inclusive to all members of our school community and had many components that fell out of line with both our school and our district goals. A major part of the PBIS system here at Winnequa involved tickets, an individual ticket award system. And not only was that ticket system hard to manage clerically, with the number of tickets needed to be printed, with awards needed to have, we also found that our students were being motivated by the tickets itself, and not being intrinsically motivated by doing what's right and doing what's right for the right reasons. And for that reason, we decided to take a different approach for this school year. And this year we decided to focus on safety, both physical safety throughout the school, but also emotional safety. And so it really started at in-service this year with our teachers, and we asked them to compile the list of school rules that we had. And we had this big, long list of the do's and don'ts of what you do and don't at school. And then we talked about safety. We talked more about emotional safety and physical safety, while also talking about equity and talking about restorative justice. And then we asked our teachers to reflect on those rules of the school. And we actually had highlighters that day, and we said in green, highlight those rules that are important, that we need to keep. In yellow, think about those ones that maybe we could get rid of, or maybe we can reward. And what are the red ones? What are the ones that we can get rid of? Which ones are mostly compliance based? And really had teachers reflect on that. And from that, we did some sorting and came up with a list of some expectations that we'd want to look to move forward with, both physically and emotionally. And then we knew it was going to be important to have student voice as well. So within the first few weeks of schools, through collaborations with the homeroom teachers, we asked students to think about what safety looked like in the school environment, not only in their classrooms, but in different areas throughout the school, from the playground to the cafeteria, to the hallways, to the bathrooms. And we asked our students what it looked like to be both physically and emotionally safe in school. And students were able to develop their own list of expectations and ways that safety should be viewed throughout the school. So we ensured that we had that student voice. And from those two lists, from both the staff and the students, we were able to create our Winnequa School Matrix that I'll show on the next slide. That matrix is what we use today in having conversations with students, with peer mediations, in restorative conversations with students, and in communications with families. Along with our school-wide matrix, homeroom teachers work together with their students on their own classroom safety matrix, both physical and emotional, along with classroom agreements and mottos to build their own community within their classroom. And while we did away with the ticket system, with the PBIS, with the old PBIS system, we still wanted a way that we could reward great behavior. But we wanted to look at it in the lens of a school community, and how we can do that as a whole school, a whole Winnequa community, from our PK4 program all the way up to our 5th grade classrooms. So Jenny Koski is going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to show the behavior matrix, and you'll have a copy of this as well. And then Jenny's going to talk to us about some whole school incentives that we've been working on this year.
So like Jesse mentioned, we got rid of like the individualized ticket system and kind of switched to kind of an all school incentive where we're all working together for like a common goal. So Hootie is our beloved mascot at Winnequa. And so we've incorporated Hootie into this incentive on this bulletin board. So we have Build the Nest was the one that we started with first. And then now we're working on Building the Wings, which they are much fuller now. They're pretty much full, and we are ready to have the kids earn their reward. So the way it works is that each classroom sets a goal that they want to focus on and get better at. So it's even collaborative within the classrooms on the goal that the class is setting together. When a student in the class, or even the class as a whole, is achieving that goal, the teacher awards a sticker feather, and they kind of collect them in their classrooms, and then they walk down and put them on the bulletin board. Once it is full, we give the classrooms 3 rewards that they can vote on, so that there's also student voice in kind of what that reward is going to be. And since our wings are full, classrooms are voting this week and then earning the reward for next Friday. So it's very collaborative. The school is working together to try and achieve this. And then we've got a reward built in as well. I think Angie's going to take it next.
So our last kind of thing that we want to talk to you about is just where else do you see equity within our Winnequa community? And one of those places is within our student groups. So we have had for a number of years a student diversity group. This group was really formed by the adults in the building as a way to create a place for students to gather with other students to make connections, but also to learn and grow together as a group around topics specifically centering around race and diversity and race. We also have had two groups form based on students. And one was our GSA group that started just last year. A student came forward to a teacher and said, I want to do this. I want to fill this need within our building. They wanted to create a place where students within our LGBTQ community can feel connected as a group. They created a t-shirt that was available to students and staff. They created signs for both inside and outside the building, and they wanted to show our students and our families and visitors to Winnequa that this is a welcoming place to be. And then just this year, we've had another group of students who it has shown an interest in creating a group around learning ASL. And this group is just getting organized, but it's just another example of where that student voice is being heard. And they're saying they want to know more and learn more about each other and accept everyone for who they are. And I feel these groups are great examples of how our equity work is really moving into and shaping our school community. And then Jenny, do you want to tell a little bit more? I know Dan mentioned at the beginning about our all school read too, but Jenny can share a little bit more.
Yeah, so we have this going on right now. We've done an all school read several times at Winnequa, and it's really been an amazing experience on so many levels. First, having everyone read the same book at the same time has been the perfect opportunity to build school community. It's added excitement, engagement, and joy around reading. It's also another way to mesh our equity and social justice focus into another area that all students are benefiting from. Our reading teachers really put a lot of thought and time into researching and picking a book that's going to fit a wide range of grade levels, since we have 4K through 5, but also trying to pick something that allows for windows and mirrors. I think that fits really well with talking about literature and having students be able to see themselves, but also see the world around them and how they're interacting with that. So this year our book is Dragons in a Bag. It's a fun fantasy adventure with many life lessons about the meaning of family and the value of friendship, bravery, and perseverance. So really, it's been a great start. We did a fun intro video with staff around the school to get students excited to read. Hootie delivered all the wrapped books in a bag, and then the bag's going to be part of kind of an end of book project that each class is going to do. So it's just another way that we've created community around Winnequa.
Thank you, Jenny. And as we wrap up and just reflecting about how far we've come and where we are going, being ingrained in the work and being a part of this community, sometimes it's easy to lose focus and to know how far we've come. And I can tell you, just sitting here tonight and being part of this and preparing for this presentation, it's had a great opportunity to reflect on all of the amazing things that are happening in our hallways every day. And we know that COVID has made this a little more difficult. Typically, Winnequa has been a community school where parents and families have been invited in and they can see this a little more easily. But we do have countless examples that this is being communicated through families and students. And I can tell you my own reflective story that I had just a couple months ago. I had a chance to have my wife and my son come visit Winnequa for the first time. It was on a weekend that we were up here looking at houses. And as I was walking my son through the hallways, my wife was kind of behind me and she was taking pictures throughout the school. And I didn't really think too much of it until she shared the photos with me later. And what she was taking pictures of was various posters and charts and examples like student banners that you had seen before. And just seeing her perspective of the environment that we are providing to students every day and how different that was from her own educational experience and educational experiences that she knows in other school districts. And so, you know, it was kind of eye-opening for her to have that great perspective of an amazing community. And I think what she took away most was how, you know, a student can feel so comfortable at our school to be celebrated and be uniquely themselves. And that's something that we're able, that if we take the time to walk through the hallway and stop and pause and hear student conversations, that we are seeing all the time, that we are seeing students being comfortable with being themselves, whether that's in the books that they're reading or the conversations that they're having at the lunch table, or even by the way that they dress and feel comfortable in their own skin here at Winnequa. There's countless examples every day where they're comfortable to be themselves. And like Angie just mentioned, they're becoming advocates, not only for themselves, but for others. They want to learn more about their peers and the differences and the different backgrounds, and they want to advocate for them and create groups and clubs to celebrate and to become allies to these student members as well. Angie, you want to close this out?
Yeah. So I'll just share too, we have allocated a lot of resources the last several years to making sure that the resources that we have for students, both in the classroom and outside, provide those mirrors and doors for students. Mirrors where students can see themselves, but doors and windows for them to see and learn about students who are different from them. We have as staff take a close examination of those, but we also have noticed our students are saying, this is what we want. We want to see this. We'd like to see some books around that. And again, that's just another example of the students speaking up and being advocates for the equity within the classrooms. Obviously, our ICS work has been instrumental in helping not only make these big systematic changes that we needed to make to create a more equitable experience, but it's also been a pathway towards our own reflection and our own conversations and dialogue around best practices, both in instruction and in interactions with our students, with our families, and with each other. So I just want to close saying this work is never complete. We've mentioned it several times, but we have worked hard to make sure that equity is infused in all aspects of our systems, in our instructional practices, and in the way that we interact with kids and the way we plan our lessons for our students. This is a journey that's never done, but one that we will continue to prioritize, to focus on, and work hard on for the betterment of all of our students. So again, thank you very much. I want to give a huge shout out to our teachers who are doing this tonight in between 2 nights of parent-teacher conferences, and I can't thank them enough. So thank you, and let us know if you have any questions.
All right, it doesn't, oh, Elizabeth, you have a question?
Oh, you know, I was gotta say something. First of all, thank you so much for such an amazing and thorough presentation. I know we've shared this with other presentations too, but I just really love and appreciate seeing kind of the buildings come and present to us on all the great work that you're doing. I loved the videos that you had with the examples. I really felt like I was there. And so I wanted to say thank you for that, particularly if you're like already invested into multiple long nights. So a couple of things I just wanted to say, and then I actually have a question. One is around your focus on identity. And I just want to really underscore and highlight how critical that is, and particularly for folks who, may be watching or seeing these things come home, and are like, why are you spending so much time like talking to my kid about who they are? Like, go teach them how to read or do math or whatever else. And how foundational it is for a person to be set in and recognize and understand who they are, and be able to recognize that in other people as different from them and also similar from them, as it relates to foundational for mental health and wellness, foundational for learning, foundational for confidence and decision making, right? And just being like a sure person in the world. And so I really just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate the time and attention you're taking around identity, and how much I know that will pay off as it relates to kind of students not just being good academic achievers, but just good citizens in the world. So thank you for that. My question is around onboarding. And so I feel like a theme of your presentation was like, we've been doing this work for a long time, right? We've got these committees, right? And it feels very community oriented, which I think is great. And what comes up for me as a wondering is, how do you onboard new folks into your system when you have things that are so well established?
Yeah. So Jesse, I mean, him being new this year, it was like, so there is this and there's this and there's this. And it does take time. It 100% takes time. We dedicate a large portion of our in-service days at the beginning of the year of walking through. So our equity team walked through a abbreviated version of some of the professional development that we've done over the last couple years. We shared some of the activities that we have done with students around identity. And then, so we've definitely focused that in some of those first few days. And then we really rely on the teams to be sharing with each other, like, oh, we've done this in the past. We do this. And again, some of it's part of the practice too, right? Some of those reflection questions that are infused into the co-planning, like those are always there. And it's different every year, right? You have different students in front of you. And so those conversations are just different. So that piece doesn't necessarily, it changes every year for everybody, depending on who's in front of you. So I don't know if the team wants to add anything else, but those are some ways.
I wanted just to add something too. I've heard a lot of new teachers come in this year. I think one thing that we have done as a district and as a school is made sure that who we are hiring have these ideals and principles set within them. And so a lot of the conversations that the equity team has had with some of the new members is, oh my gosh, I found my people, I found my tribe, because they come to us with these same ideals and visions. And I think that is a testament to some of the work that the district has done and the hiring committees and the administration, because they're coming in ready to be onboarded, I guess.
Yeah.
And that was the very real experience that I was going to share too. I mean, I think this district and Winnequa specifically has a reputation, and it's has a great reputation, and people want to come to be a part of this work. We're very clear in hiring processes, how important this work is. And typically that match is us finding those people who it's important to, and them finding us too. And so it's a partnership of people that are really wanting to be here and wanting to be a part of that work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Susan Manning?
Yes, I just also want to say that this was absolutely an incredible presentation. I've so appreciated that Dan has brought these programs into our work that we do. It makes you feel so much better. We went to the Milwaukee school board meeting a while ago, and to talk to the other school board members and how many people are quitting and being stressed, and to hear you all talk tonight, and so many of you that have helped raise my children. This was just a wonderful evening, and it was greatly appreciated. And to see Jesse's integration into the community feels so good, provided so many assurances. And one of the things that has been a huge focus and a major concern and a major challenge during this time is mental health of the staff, the teachers, and the students. And this presentation tonight, particularly with that identity fabric piece, has just provided me with great assurance that you're using your expertise and your teamwork to identify that and work on those issues as they're related to all the other work that you do. And I really appreciate that, particularly during this challenging time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Eric and then Susan Fox.
Well, thank you, Angie and Jesse and the rest of the staff. It was a very informal presentation. I can say I firsthand have experienced hearing some of these things when my daughter has, because she's a student at Winnequa, has come home and I've talked to her. We always ask her what she does during the school day because she's in a teacher family. So she knows that's our dinner conversation. And I just have to say, from a reflective point of myself, I think, and Elizabeth brought this up about, why aren't we teaching about reading, math, and writing? And that is my first concern at all times, usually. So I think generationally, we have to remind ourselves that our children are not, living in a world that we were living in when we were growing up. So there is constant change happening all the time. So it's easy to say, why aren't we doing the things that we did when we were in school? And I think if we just take a step back and remember, that's exactly what our parents were saying. So in order to kind of evolve, we need to have an open mind. And that is tough for me, I'll admit, as a parent. It's tough for me to understand that. But I will say, I have heard my daughter speak exactly about what you just presented and give me concrete examples and even question myself on what I've thought. So the growth in learning is definitely present and noticeable. So I really appreciate the effort that the school and the district is putting into that. Even if I'm struggling myself as an older generational person, adapting to that. So.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. Susan Fox.
Yeah, I also really appreciated hearing the affirmation of the changes we've made in our hiring process, hearing that is working and you're getting the kinds of people who are more, willing to buy into this, and not only willing to buy in, but excited about it. That's really good to hear. I guess, and the other thing is, I thought your whole presentation, I did just such a good job about kind of getting at what Eric was just talking about and explaining how important this is. And we always talk about how you can't really have the successful academics without the engagement of kids. And all of this work, it's another, because I think there sometimes is a misunderstanding when we use the word equity and we talk about doing this work among some parents thinking, well, is this now going to focus on just certain kids, maybe at the expense of my kids? And you just did such an excellent job of just explaining all the kinds of work that you're doing and making it so clear that it's just such excellent developmental work for all kids, which I think we all know, but sometimes that gets lost in the conversation. So I really appreciate that part. I hope some parents are watching this tonight and that you can present it kind of in a similar way with parents as well. I mean, I just think it's really, it was just a nice pulling together of a lot of the work that you're doing. I'm sure there's even more. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, it doesn't appear to be any other questions. I just want to echo the same things that my fellow board members are saying. This was a phenomenal presentation, and it's truly evident that you are passionate about your work. Our children are very lucky. So thank you again to the entire Winnequa staff, and hopefully you'll get some rest after this. So thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
All right, next is Director of Business Services report, Jared.
Good evening. Tonight I am here to give a report out on ESR3. So if you recall, federal government passed 3 rounds of federal COVID relief funding to come to states to be passed along to educational institutions. And we've been waiting for a final allocation to come through for ESR3, the last round. If you recall, DPI submitted that had to submit their reports or their plan to Joint Finance Committee, who then modified their plan to reduce the amount of funding that would come to school districts that were not in person, with at least that met at least 50% of the time last school year. We were one of those school districts where we received less funding because of that plan. Once the Joint Finance Committee approved or modified the DPI plan, DPI needed to submit that to the Federal Department of Education, who then rejected the state of Wisconsin's plan and required DPI to do a modification. They submitted their final plan or their updated plan based on feedback from the Department of Education and gave that to Joint Finance, and Joint Finance did approve that or sign off on that. What does that mean for us? So our final ESSER funding is $2,727,000. So since that funding just came through, we're still waiting for the official announcement from DPI, but we've reached out to DPI. We got confirmation that that is the correct amount for Monona Grove. Obviously, they're working through their final approval stages, and we don't expect that money to change. But what does that mean? That means that the district has until September of 2024 to incorporate that into our budgets. We cannot start touching those funds until we actually spend out ESSER 1, which was approximately $82,000, and then ESSER 2, which was $427,000, and then we can move to ESSER 3. We do plan on working through that. We don't have any specific plans yet to present, but it will be part of our budgeting process. But wanted to report out that you probably saw in the news that the ESSER 3 funds were allocated or approved by Joint Finance. And so that is our amount, is the $2.7 million. Any questions?
Elizabeth?
Thanks, Jared. Not a question, actually, just a request. It doesn't have to be like immediately, but can you put together a document that just lays out ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and the end dates for them, just like in one matrix? That would be helpful.
Well, certainly.
Thank you.
All right. It doesn't appear to be any other questions, Jared. Thank you so much for your report. Oh, Elizabeth, you have a question?
Sorry, I have one more question. And actually, this may be a better question for Dan. When is our plan for ESSER 3 funds due?
The initial plan is due on March 11th. That caught us all a little by surprise. They didn't announce that until just recently, but we can modify it after that. So we'll be good to go, and we'll be sharing that with the board before it gets submitted.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you again, Jared. Next is our superintendent report. Dan?
Okay, of course, we've lately had a standing update with regard to what's happening with our operating plan and with public health and our mitigation strategies. So last time we met, think public health, Madison-Dane County had just extended their emergency order, or issued order number 7. That one is due to expire on March 1st. And so what has happened in the last 2 weeks? So obviously we're all aware the case numbers have dropped dramatically. We're thrilled about that, of course. Our local COVID dashboard, there's a link on there with it. You get that as well twice a week. And so our numbers in each individual school, are really much lower than they were a month ago. And so now that the conversation is turning to, well, at what point perhaps might Public Health Madison-Dane County not extend it another month? And is March 1st perhaps that date? And we think there's a very real possibility that will happen. And so in our conversation last week, of course, our representatives from PHMDC, can't really share a whole lot. In fact, he doesn't necessarily know, but what you had a chance to meet Dr. Demuri at a recent meeting, and as well Dr. Budris is part of that group. And based on the trending, they also are advisors to public health. And so we're proceeding as though it will expire as far as our planning. And so that's something these next 3 weeks will continue. And the one piece of feedback that we've given, to the representatives from PHMDC is, obviously the earlier they can let us know, the better, so that we can prepare and we can communicate on a timely basis to our families if there are going to be any changes. So looking ahead and to think a little bit about, okay, what happens if it does expire? Then what? Okay, well, we really puts us back into a situation that we were in November. If you recall, at that time, things were getting better, and in fact, public health had even come out and said they were not going to extend it another month. Then Omicron came and they had to change course and reissue again. And so at that time, we did adjust our operating plan, and we were prepared to make some modifications to our mitigation strategies. And so I did put a link for you just as a reminder of the message that went to families on November 20th that has a link to the plan that we had at that time. I'm confident in saying that as a starting point, that would be the first place that we would look to go, is to back to that plan, and then continue about, okay, what else have we learned in these last months? I want to really stress still the most important thing is, what can we do to make sure that we have kids in school? Okay, but we also know that we want to have as much flexibility. I mean, we're all sick of the masks. Let's just be honest about that. But we also know this is a really key, one of the mitigation strategies that goes together. So in that plan that we had in November, the first thing as far as rolling back were some of the after-school voluntary activities, things that like our competitions and performances, our music, and so on. And so those are the things I think that we would go back to first. In our conversations with our health experts, we're trying to look at, okay, where might the public health agencies make some changes in their recommendations? Because the one thing that's been really important to us is that the recommendations from CDC, DHS, AAP, all those organizations, the parts that they're aligned on, it makes it really easy for us to say, okay, we should be following those recommendations. What might they change? And the kind of the conventional wisdom is that probably the thing that will get changed first is some of the rules and procedures for quarantining and adjustments that way. And of course, any changes there would be welcome to us if it means more kids in school. And so that's something we'll just continue to monitor, week by week here as we go along. And as we get update and information, I'll obviously try to keep you informed on a timely basis. And then the last thing I'll just mention real quick before we open it up to questions and comments. The other thing I just wanted to mention, vaccination clinics. Of course, at this point, that does seem that our families have access pretty well, but we're keeping communication with our local pharmacies and so on. And should a vaccine become available for the ages 2 to 4, and we see an interest, of course, we'd consider a vaccination clinic, for that, as well as our younger students as they become eligible for boosters. If there appears to be a need that we can provide that space, we'll certainly, do that as well, moving forward. So, So that let me just pause there and just, what type of things would you like to talk about? Any questions and so on?
Susan Manning?
Yeah, Dan, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing that. There probably is a link here to that November 20th, 21 message. Could you just give us a quick overview on that so that anybody else that's not in board docs could hear that?
Sure. And I'm sorry if the link's not live. I mean, maybe after we're done, if you refresh, it might be there. But on our COVID page on our website also is a link to it. We archived every message that went to families over the last 2 years. Okay, so it's all there as well. And so in that 20th message, it was to remind families that at that point the order had been lifted. And then in that message was a link to our operational plan. And specifically, we had a plan at that point called our activities and athletics update. And that's where we had the specifics about where we scaled back a few things with regard to competitions, performances, as well as, spectators and so on.
Okay, Eric?
Well, thank you, Dan. That was helpful to get the update on that. I know that there's been a lot of questions, as Lorraine mentioned at the beginning of the board meeting. What I'd really like to see, Dan, is maybe at the next board meeting have this as a discussion item, and I'll bring that up when we get to future meetings. But in the meantime, I think it's important to remind the public and community that we previously, as a board, already agreed and voted that we'd follow the guidelines from Dane County Public Health. So I think there's some anxiety of, when I think people want to know when this is, if Dane County says that masks are not going to be required anymore, does that mean that it's going to be in schools? And if it does mean it's going to be in schools, what is that going to look like? So I think the majority of the communities just wants more information and clarity about how we're going to go about doing this transition, because it's another transition that we're going to have to make as a district. So any pre-planning that we could do to make it easier, and some of the concerns I've had, and actually some myself that people might not think about, is like, I have to purchase masks, how much, I have to judge, do I want to get 100 masks or I want to get 50 masks? Well, that costs us money. It's not necessarily, they're not cheap, really, So I'm going to purchase 200 masks if I know March 1st that they may lift the order, but they may lift the order and still require it in school. So that's another thing to consider too. So I really think as much information about this as possible up to that March 1st date is going to be really helpful for everybody, just to plan for that transition that's coming. So I don't think it can be too much information.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And and the timing should play out pretty well. I mean, we're really hopeful that next board meeting, on the 23rd, that's a week before the orders set to expire. It'd be really nice if we have some sort of statement from public health by that time about whether they're going to extend it or not. And we'll be prepared either way. And
just one more thing. I think it's also important to remember that things like buses fall under the federal guidelines, not the school guidelines. So there still will most likely be masks required on buses, and that goes for all buses in our country because of the federal guidelines. That's correct, right, Dan? So there might be some cross rules there.
Yeah, so that's one of the few things. Most of the things from the CDC are recommendations. That's the one thing that is actually an order that's enforceable is, like you mentioned, with its bus and transportation. And there's been no indication that would change anytime soon.
Elizabeth?
Do we know the percentages of our students who are vaccinated?
We do. So that's something that, as far as our access to the Wisconsin Immunization Registry and what access, and we actually have been working really hard, and I give a credit to our Krista and her team to be able to look at that and keep confidentiality. So we have been able to run reports. I can tell you that at the high school, we are well over 80% of our students that are vaccinated. And then our youngest, we're in the probably mid 60s in the elementary, and the middle school, somewhere in between there. So all in all, obviously very good, overall compared to.
Yeah, I asked because, we'll see what, public health has to say. And also it is different than November in that, we do have vaccines available for certainly not the youngest folks, but the majority of our school age kids at this point. And so I think if Dane County does sunset the order, then we'd want to think about, what is our own standard in terms of vaccinations, and when would that be that tipping point of, we've got 80% kids vaccinated, we're going to go without masks or kind of whatever those metrics are.
Yeah, really good point. That was a key data piece that something that wasn't. So we had at the beginning of the year, right? So.
Susan Manning?
The other thing that's really great, in case any of you are interested, and I was going to send you the link, and the meeting started and I got caught but I will try and do that. But the CDC has lists of research and studies on both sides on the masks, and from all over, but a significant number of those studies are done in schools. And they not only talk about the percentages of COVID cases in schools with masks versus not in masks, or even classrooms, but they also talk, they have several studies about the effect of masks. And then they also talk about the physiological effect of masks. So again, the studies are excellent. And then they also talk about some studies that are inaccurate. So again, if you like that kind of resource, it's really a good resource on some of that material.
Thank you, Susan. Peter?
As we transition away from masks in terms of the mental health, which I think we're going to do, looking to be sooner than later, because it looks like we sort of rounded the curve here, which is a great thing. One of the things we want to talk about is in terms of need to be information. I want to echo what Eric says, because we need to get information out there, and the reason is because of an anxiety issue, particularly among students. One of the pieces of data is that pretty clear. And I wasn't aware of it until I came across some of the literature that we're getting from these people who are, Return for Smiles campaign and so on, was that 70% of students feel safer in environments where people are masked. And anxiety is an issue for these students and for the mental health and for participation. And so we want to be very careful with the information, make sure that we are very good about getting information out there. And particularly, I want to see if there's ways that what we can do to address that issue. Because I think there'll be, when the day that where masks are optional or whatever it is, there's going to be a lot of anxious students in our schools. And from a mental health point of view, we do want to make sure we can, do what we can to mitigate that.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I think there's going to be a lot of kind of unlearning that we need to do, particularly for our students on the younger end of the spectrum who have very limited school experiences outside of the pandemic. Even thinking about speaking personally with my own son, he's constantly asking, do I need a mask? Should I have a mask? It's part of his daily routine. And so, I think Peter's point is really important in terms of, as we're kind of downshifting or titrating off or off ramping or kind of whatever language you want to use there, we need to really think about how are we supporting our students in feeling, right, that this is a safe thing to do, and that, you're still safe here and everything is okay. Like I said, particularly for our elementary school students who just have very limited normal school experiences.
And that anxiety comes about because there's been a number of these, some of the kids are exposed to death and disease for, due to COVID. And it's certainly on the news. They've heard about people that, famous people that have succumbed to disease, but also it's touched a number of families. So that anxiety is real, and we need to be prepared for it, and we need to be prepared to mitigate it.
All right. Thank you, Peter. There doesn't appear to be any other questions regarding that, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next is the board reports. So Policy Committee, Susan Manning.
There we go. The Policy Committee met this morning, and they first looked at the sustainability policies, 7460 and 7461. The committee members continued to discuss the draft policy submitted by the board's Sustainability Committee. along with input from Superintendent Olson and Business Services Director Jared Rosing. Members expressed appreciation for the work of the Sustainability Committee in creating a draft for us to review, and that was really great of them to put that material together. The policy committee members have done additional research on school district sustainability policies after their last committee meetings and shared concerns about the prescriptive nature of the current draft, the specificity. Consensus at the meeting this morning was reached to consider use of a sustainability policy draft prepared by the Oregon Green Schools program as a basis for creation of the district policy. Superintendent Olson and Jared are going to be reviewing that, providing input, and we're looking at all documents, not just one document. So we continue to have the samples and policies all in front of us so that we can make sure that we meet all the needs of the district. Consensus was reached that the new draft policy that we're going to review is instead of having two policies, we'll have one collaborative policy to cover that. We did not get to review of the SRO related policies due to lack of time. We spent a significant amount of time looking at the research that the committee had done and other sample policies and work related to sustainability. So future agenda items, we're going to continue to look at sustainability policy, and we should have another draft to work on at our next meeting, which is going to be February 23rd. We tried to schedule it sooner so that we could get to that. The SRO policies and a wellness policy. We're also looking at, due to some input, community input, a policy that would address the use of putting up other schools' Native American mascots and related team names, such used in athletic programs, attire and appearance of mascots in events. So we're going to look at a policy in that arena. And again, this committee has done a significant amount of personal and committee work in researching the issues that we've been working on lately. And I really appreciate that and want to thank the committee for that work.
Thank you, Susan Manning. Next is the Ad Hoc Sustainability Committee. Peter?
Thank you. We met last Thursday. We talked about a couple of things, three things. First off, we got an update from McKinstry on the high school solar project, which there's some issues with some of the parts, essentially a transformer for the interconnect, which will delay sort of the ability to turn the system on until midsummer at some point. But the installation is going to go ahead. We'll see them put stuff on the roof over spring break. In fact, is currently the plan, and they say they have essentially all of the parts in Madison, so that should be ready to go. We also talked about Jared and four other school districts got together and submitted a EIGP grant application for some essentially analysis and for some building an infrastructure to share data, an analysis of energy consumption and utility bills and so on, that should help put the districts involved in a better place in terms of making decisions in terms of energy usage. It was really interesting to hear the proposal, and I hope that we all hope that moves forward and they get funded to do that. The third thing we talked about was the outreach for the solar project, which is ongoing, and after some discussion, we'd like to sort of have we'd like to have a open house style event once the once the solar panels and so on are installed. We'd like to do that before the end of the school year. We talked about the date of May 22nd, and I yet have to discuss this with Dan and Mitch and so on, and see if we can move ahead with that, because but we're sort of preliminarily planning what we want to do. May 22nd. Did I say March? May 22nd. And then one last thing, which is that after our Presentation Renew conference just yesterday, we were invited to fill an empty slot, to give the same presentation, to fill an empty spot at the WASBO facilities meeting, which has happening next week. So we haven't decided if we'll be able to pull it together to do that, but we were invited to do that, which would be next week. So maybe we'll get that together and get that done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Our next is the Monona Grove Education Foundation, Susan Manning.
The Monona Grove Education Foundation met on Tuesday, February 8th. Dan Olson reported first, and he had brought administrative staff. So these guys have been attending a lot of meetings lately to assist with identifying needs in the district that could be assisted by foundation funding. And Angie and Krista were there. Then there were committee reports, and Jane Beebe provide an update on the Play It Forward grants. Their board discussed with the staff opportunities for funding and specific projects, and they're going to continue to look at needs and assist the foundation with identification of needs. They've received 6 grants for their innovative grants, and they will be reviewing those. There's no update from the communications committee. The fundraising committee is starting their work on the golf ball drop, and the scholarship committee brought forward major new business. So the board approved establishing, this is fun, a Patty McGinnis scholarship. So that's neat. They also approved establishing a Kent Evenstead Memorial Teaching Scholarship. They approved establishing a Lavick Endowment Fund for scholarships, and also an endowment fund and scholarship fund. So they're 2 separate funds. And then they approved the funding of their spring 2022 scholarships. There was some discussion about 3 open board seats, and they're looking for interested community members to serve on the board. And the board approved the annual funding to schools from the school endowment funds from the Madison Community Foundation. And I would just mention to the board so that they're aware, each of our individual schools has an endowment fund. There was fundraising several years ago for an endowment fund, and I think it's at $10,000. And then each year, whatever interest on that fund, on that endowment fund, goes to the school for spending. And I think in 2021, there was probably, because of the pandemic, non-identification of specific needs because they were working so hard on so many other things. But all of the schools for 2021 have available funds of $500 or more. So it's important that administration, and they are communicating with the foundation for that funding. So it was fun to watch the meeting and see the kind of work that they're doing to supplement the district budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. All right, next are possible action items. Preliminary notice of non-renewal of teacher contract. Andrew?
I'd like to move approval of the preliminary notice of non-renewal of teacher contract as presented.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All right, Roll call vote. Peter,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Susan Manning,
Aye.
Susan Fox,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Elizabeth,
Aye.
Lorene, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next are discussion items. First is policy revisions, first reading.
I can kick it off. Or Susan, you want to?
Well, these are all Neola policy revisions, and Dan worked extensively on review of these. So you might want to add your thoughts administratively about the read.
Yeah, so these updates really didn't change. I mean, as you know, most of the things related to non-discrimination, those policies are to make sure that we're in compliance, with state and federal laws. And so the big changes really were just cleaning up some of the procedures and with regard to how to process potential complaints and so on. And so a number of these are identical policies, but they're repeated depending on whether they're for administrative staff, support staff, or professional staff. But really, that's the major changes, with them. So as Susan said, it's a lot of language, there's a lot to read through, but at the end of the day, I think they read better than what we had and provide better clarity for our staff should we have to refer to these policies, should we have any of these situations that arise.
Well, and Dan went through these line by line, and he also did it with administrative staff by line. And as a committee, we went through it absolutely line by line. And generally, just as Dan said, they were really adding clarity so that the statements that were said in the policy were clear to those who read them.
Doesn't appear to be any questions. All right. Moving on to 2022-2023 capital budget projects budget.
All right, this is a discussion item or more of a point of information tonight. So we will bring this back at hopefully the next board meeting for approval. So we're continuing to work through development of our annual capital improvement budgets on projects that are typically done in the summer that don't fall within, maintenance budgeting. And if you recall, when we went to operational referendum a few cycles back, we were only putting in maybe $250,000 into our capital budget. And we really made a commitment to increase that to $650,000. So we are targeting $650,000 again this year. Obviously, COVID is affecting capital budget and trying to get all the bidding and quoting to meet board policy and identifying those processes or those projects that we want to offer this summer. We've been back and forth. We have one project that we're getting geared up to put on the list, and then we discover that the project won't be able to get done until November or December. So then we pull that off and bring another item up that we've prioritized. So this is a work in progress. I do have the document under admin content due to the fact that we are still quoting and bidding, and we don't want to release the prices that we're seeing right now with some vendors, negotiating with them as well to try to get the most projects out of our $650,000. I do want to note that right now, you'll notice that we don't have any roofs on this project, which is exciting because of our last referendum and the amount that went into maintenance. We were able to get all those updated. And, we have the new building. New building's not on here, and it shouldn't be on here. And a lot of these projects are more of the smaller side because of our maintenance portion of the referendum, which was great. So now we can just stay ahead of those projects and the buildings as they continue to age or things change. The biggest project that's listed here is it's located at MG21 / the district office. And we're looking at doing a reconfiguration mostly due to the expanding and upgrading the playground area for MG21, which then will evolve over into some updates to the parking lot for additional parking. But the priority is right around getting a quality playground outdoor educational environment for our MG21 for both the middle and upper campus. And that would consist of creating, if you've been to the district where MG21's at, all the asphalt, the old hard surface playground area is all chipped up. So we do have basketball hoops out there, but it's really challenging for those kids to play on that because it's just terrible. So we're going to put half of it blacktop, and then the other half is going to be a soft area. So we'd be looking at some other types of play equipment with MG21 and then modifying that so we don't have vehicles that are parking back there and moving those to the parking lot. And that's why we also need to add a few parking stalls and then upgrading where the buses come in so we can have a better, safer drop off. So that's really the largest project that is currently being proposed in the draft budget. Other than that, most everything else is pretty typical. You know, obviously we always have to resurface our high school or refinish our high school gym floor. We are actually expanding that into some of our elementary or at Winnequa because that's due. And also at GDS, we also need to update the parking lot at GDS and more of rip up and not just resurface. It has to have some grinding that needs to be done. So we're working through some of those. But overall, you'll see there's a little bit of HVAC upgrades at each of those. And those are just around control panels and things that were not included in that original maintenance referendum that, you know, they're just getting to end of life and we have the opportunity to replace them now to stay ahead of it. And, but like I said, this is a draft. These numbers are changing almost on a daily, or a schedule is changing. And so we're hoping to get everything secured into place so we can bring this to the board at the next board meeting for approval. But like I said, we are still maintaining and looking for that $650,000 budget. And I would continue, even though we've done some great work through the facility referendum, that we maintain that 650 or, you know, definitely increase. We've added another building to our overall. We just don't want to get behind the 8 ball. Obviously, there's going to be roofs that need to be repaired in, you know, a number of years, but hopefully, you know, those big dollar amount things have been taken care of. Obviously, as we continue to work through possibly looking at different funding opportunities for sustainability and looking at some of those projects, obviously we have an area to look into the capital budget project going forward as well. But this is where we're at. It's sort of hard to believe that, you know, GDS is at that point where we're going to spend a decent amount of money of replacing carpet. But there's lots of wear and tear, lots of students that went through there. And so that would be the other large project that will be happening this summer. Any questions?
Peter?
What's the expected lifetime of a playground in the blacktop parking lot?
Well, it depends on upkeep, but a playground is usually a pretty long life due to the fact that there's not large vehicles or multiple vehicles on it. I would tell you that depending on how hard the winters are, definitely not an expert when it comes to maintenance either, but I would say that at least, you know, 12 to 15 years before you would have to do major repairs on a playground hard surface area. And then there's, you know, every couple of years we do have to replace the soft, like if there's wood chips or pea gravel, those things do need to be replaced because they do just get, you know, pushed out with kids or students playing in there. And if you use wood chips, obviously they disintegrate over time. And so we have to make sure that we have the right base for that. So the blacktop or the hard surface side of a playground is definitely much longer life expectancy than a parking lot, just because there's not the amount of vehicles that are driving on it.
You know, the reason I ask is that, you know, it's a lot of money. It's $380,000, and I want to make sure that we get that matches up with our plans for use of the building and the site to make sure that we get a usable fraction, a substantial fraction of usable life out of that facility. And so, you know, sort of that's my question. I mean, that presumes that we're going to be in that spot with MG21 and middle school students also, I think, for an extended period of time. And so I want to verify that that's consistent with what our thinking of what we're going to continue to do to that site.
No, that makes sense. And I would say that, the largest part of that expenditure is because it's such an older age, we have to rip everything up and bring in additional soil in the drainage and then also the reconfiguration of the curb and stuff like that as well. But I mean, obviously, I think long term, we would hopefully are there for a long period of time. Obviously, we have space. And based on the enrollment numbers, I don't expect us to outgrow that area, but I'll let Dan speak to that more specifically as to long-term possibilities.
And more importantly, do we outgrow the useful lifetime or the usability of that facility there? I mean, are there other requirements? The space, the age, et cetera, that we need to make consider changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, as you know, that was the first phase of our facilities referendum, dollars that first summer, the renovations to, that portion of the building. So yeah, it absolutely is part of the long range planning. I have had conversations with the governance board and, about what they'd like to see as far as enrollment, growth. And so we absolutely are making plans that this is a long term. The other thing I would add is that this was really well thought out as far as the project that's going to be, completed. When we opened the middle campus, going on 3 years ago now, we recognize the need, but, instead of rushing and trying to do something quickly that first summer, they've had an opportunity now to be in the space for a couple of years. So we have a better idea what those real needs are as well. So I think the other thing, and Jared, I'm not sure what percentage of it, but an awful lot of that cost is actually for the parking lot and the bus drive, not just the playground.
That is correct.
Could we get more details do you have a preliminary plan or something that you could show us to that of what's going on there, just so we know? Yeah,
I'm more than happy to bring that. Like I said, we're still finalizing every single. We're looking at ways to reduce the cost, but I don't have an issue or a problem of sharing that with the board. It's for final approval.
Right, it's about 2/3 of the money you're proposing to spend here, and that's why it's of concern. The other question I would have you thought ahead in terms of this to what needs might be at Maywood and the planning there? But I know that there's probably significant deferred maintenance, and we do have to, at the very least, if we're not using the building, we have to keep it in one piece. And I don't know what the plans are, but does that factor into your long-term capital planning?
Yes, so our overall 5-year plan has money that's allocated. We do have some HVAC upgrades that potentially need to be done. There's some roofing that we have been able to maintain within the regular budget, but we've maintained looking at that. I don't have any specific plans. Obviously, we're just having those conversations. And once Madison moves out, what is that going to look like for the district? And so being able to get some of these other small hanging fruits done now, it frees up those additional funds. The other thing that I'm going to be looking at, and the other part of it that's challenging for us is, we're a negative aided school district. However, so every dollar that we spend over a certain dollar amount, we lose state aid for. But there is the capabilities of creating a trust where we can put funds away on an annual basis. And it goes into there. And if you do it each year, and after 5 years, then you can start pulling money out of that. Especially with us moving forward with the solar project and the high school turf. Those are things that we know are going to have a replacement cycle or things that have to be updated. And so we're exploring what does that look like and how much impact does that have on the loss of aid or what's that benefit. But that would be one of the goals, is that the board would have to, if we decide to go down that path, create that trust and annually fund it. So if you put in $50,000 each year, it continues to grow, and then after a number of years, and then you can start pulling that money out. But because a lot of times when you look at school finance, everything's in Fund 10, and whatever you don't spend just goes into your fund balance, which is a positive aided situation. But it's also, for us, it's a positive aided situation. However, in the eyes of lawmakers, I think then we have additional funds that we don't need per pupil on an annual basis, even though we're trying to potentially put some money away for a rainy day, and that whole fund balance is not all cash. So by being able to create this type of trust, we're able to really earmark those funds for projects that would need it, which then allows you to expand your $650,000 capital budget. Because, you know, I mean, we do know that eventually we're going to have to replace the turf. There's just wear and tear, and that's a significant amount of money. The option is to, you know, not plan for that and then just go to an operational referendum or a maintenance referendum, or put a little bit of money away each year that allows us to have that fund to be able to pull from. And if we have rental of those fields, put some of that funds away into that and really create a very transparent process that individuals see that we are putting money away for future facility upgrades that need to happen while maintaining or growing the capital budget as we grow as a district.
What are the operational savings of the turf field compared to the natural grass?
I don't have that off the top of my head, and obviously it's just fairly new for us, so we haven't been able to really scope all that out. Those are all estimates that we have, but I don't have those with me tonight.
Okay.
Okay, Jared, it doesn't appear to be any other questions. So thank you again for your presentation. All right, next are future meeting dates. Next meeting is February 23rd, and the following one is on March 9th, and they are all also on board docs. And can I have a motion for adjournment?
Hey, Lori.
Yes.
I wanted to, before you make a motion to adjourn, I think this is a proper place. I wanted to make a motion to include something as a discussion item for the February 23rd board meeting. And I emailed everybody about that, but I wanted to make a motion to include the PHMDC emergency orders and MG safety protocols for COVID as a discussion item on the meeting for February 23rd.
Well, Susan, do you want to also respond to that? There's a policy that explains how you process requests for an agenda item. I don't have it directly in front of me right this minute, but it's my impression. I'd have to look it up. Did you look up that policy, Eric, before you brought that motion?
Susan Fox?
The process for getting something on the agenda is simply to ask the board president and the superintendent, because the policy says the superintendent plans our agendas with the advice of the board president. I think it's not inappropriate for us to just, I don't think we need a motion, but I think for us to just discuss right now to see if, I think what all Eric's asking for, as I understand it, is to have a discussion item that and instead of having it just in Dan's board report, to have it as a discussion item. Since there may be a change coming up, I think the idea was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but the idea was that it's more publicly visible that we are in fact going to be addressing it at that meeting rather than having it as part of the superintendent's report. I don't personally have a problem with doing it that way. You know, your superintendent report could still cover some related things, or maybe you have some other things, or maybe you don't have one that meeting either. But I think part of it is just, I think what I heard you saying earlier, Eric, was that you just wanted the public to be aware that we were going to be discussing it. And that it shows up more if it says a separate discussion item. I don't personally have a problem with that. I have one more comment about the March 9 date, but I'll let other people maybe weigh in on this if that's what the preference is. I mean, I'd support doing that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, if I can just hear from other board members. Peter?
Yeah, I would support that.
Susan Manning?
Yeah, that's fine.
Elizabeth?
Works for me.
Andrew?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, and myself, yes, it's fine.
So then my other question was about March 9, because Dan had sent us an email saying the Dane County Equity Consortium changed that workshop. Wasn't it the 9th, Dan? That changed to the 9th. And so if we wanted to be able to attend that, we would have to change our board meeting date. And we have to do that by a vote, which would have to be at the next February meeting. So I don't know if there's interest in doing that. Should just be thinking about that for the next meeting. I guess I'd like to see that on.
Well, I don't know how many people plan to attend. I was going to try to make it there, so I don't know if anybody else is.
I would also like
I
to
was
attend.
also, so.
Yeah, so maybe.
Yeah, so I guess
we
it
wouldn't
would
have a quorum, so maybe we should reschedule.
it would make sense to have that on our agenda at the next meeting to change that board meeting date, right?
All right, so what I'll do then is, we'll definitely have it as an agenda item for you to change the date of that regular meeting, and then I'll perhaps put a couple options for you. You guys check your calendars, and then you can vote on a date. You know, that a lot of times when we have a conflict on Wednesday, we just try to go the night before on that Tuesday. So that'd be the first choice, but if people have conflicts there, we could have a couple options for you. But at the end of the day, as you said, you'll just vote on a date.
Do you want kind of a show of hands right now about that Tuesday, or just to give an idea? Not that.
No, that might be helpful, I guess, sure.
Works for me. Tuesday's great. Better than Thursday and better than the following Wednesday.
What day? Sorry.
Tuesday,
8th?
Tuesday, the 22nd instead of February. I mean, I'm sorry, March. Tuesday, the 8th instead of the 9th. Actually, that's right. Any of those days.
7 o'clock? Yeah, I can do that.
Because then we
Peter?
can all kind of pencil it in.
Is
until
that fine?
we go to
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So it looks like everyone, Dan.
Okay, great. So I'll have it for a revised calendar for the 8th for you to approve.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, just one more thing around future dates. We had talked at a previous meeting, I think, around a special session specific to mental health policies and practices in the district. So can we just start floating some dates around for that? Like not this meeting, but like over email.
And you were requesting a more of a workshop type thing, so it could be a longer conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not at a regular board meeting, but like an actual dedicated session.
Okay, thank you.
It's okay, I'll make a note of that and have some proposed dates for you.
Okay, no other questions. We have a motion. Oh, you have, okay, Elizabeth?
I don't. I just wanted to do that.
Hi, Andrew. Maybe.
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion is carried. Have a good